Once upon a time, there lived a girl called Nneka who wanted to get married badly. Everyone around Nneka was getting married, and this made her feel left out. All she wanted was to also get married just like her friends. A fisherman who was older than her asked for her hand in marriage. Nneka didn't think twice. She accepted the offer and married him. He was uneducated, but he was very kind and hardworking. Few years into their marriage, they were blessed with a baby boy. Her husband was so happy that he asked her what she wanted as a wedding gift, since he couldn't give her one when they got married. Nneka said, "My husband, I would love us to move to the big city so I could also work and help." The man said, "Okay, if it makes you happy, I will do it for you, my wife." After a few months, they moved to the big city. Nneka's husband, who was still a fisherman, always went back to the village to fish, while Nneka remained in the city to take care of their child. The husband didn't fail to visit them whenever he was free. As time went on, Nneka became pregnant again and gave birth to another beautiful baby girl. Her husband was very happy. Everything was going well until Nneka met two friends named Glory and Janet. Glory was a single lady, while Janet was married. But Janet's husband was completely unavailable to her and her kids because of his kind of job. These ladies always hung out, and they wanted their new friend Nneka to join them whenever they were out. One day they invited her to join them, but Nneka told them that she couldn't go out as she has kids to take care of and no other person to help her. Janet told Nneka that she could employ a maid, the maid that would help her take care of the kids and the house whenever she's not around. Janet also said that she also has kids and she has maids that helps her take care of her own kids. Nneka bought the idea and employed a maid. The maid was hardworking and was always doing everything Nneka said. Janet and Glory convinced Nneka that whenever she wanted to go out of the house, knowing that her husband would call, she would tell the maid that the maid should tell the husband that she was either sleeping or she was out getting stuff. Nneka did exactly what her friends had told. Every now and then, Nneka and her friends would go out and have fun. Sometimes Nneka will come back home very late. Sometimes she sleeps out of the house. Whenever her husband called, the maid would do exactly what Nneka had instructed her to do. Nneka's husband started to get uncomfortable with the new developments. He suspected that something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what the problem was. He became very uncomfortable. So he spoke to his wife one day and asked her, "Nneka, is there a problem? Is there something you want to talk to me about?" The wife said no, that there was nothing wrong. This bothered the man. He started to think of ways to find out what the problem was with his home. So one day, Nneka left the house that she was going to get something, just as she usually does. She told her maid that if her husband comes and asks of her, that she should respond to the husband that she has gone out to get something, regardless of the time he calls. And if he calls really late and she's not back, she tell the husband that she's sleeping and the kids are okay. One fateful day, the husband decided to visit the house without calling the maid or his wife. He got to his house and realized that Nneka wasn't home. It was just the maid and his kids. Then he asked, "Where is my wife?" The maid said that she had just gone out to get something. The husband said, "No problem." After a few hours, he asked the maid again, "Where is my wife?" Said, "I don't know, sir, but she will be back home soon." The husband said, "No problem, I have heard. If my wife calls you, tell my wife that I haven't called you today, and do not tell my wife I am home." The maid said, "Okay." That evening, Nneka called the husband to find out why he hasn't called her the whole day. The husband said he was busy with work. Nneka called her maid to ask if her husband had called. The maid said no, that the husband hasn't called. Nneka was still out partying and enjoying her time with her friends, not knowing that her husband was already home waiting for her. The man, deep down in his heart, started to wonder what had gone wrong with his wife. Where did his wife learn such kind of way? He was shocked at the extent his wife could go to lie, because his wife had already called the maid a couple of times since he was home. He checked on his kids and realized they were okay. He put them to sleep and he went to sleep. The entire night he was worried because he is thinking that this is not the wife he got married to. Morning came and his wife returned home. Little did she know that her husband was already home waiting for her. She entered the house in shock. She screamed, "Jesus!" The minute she saw her husband, he was on his way to go drop his kids at school. He didn't say a word to her. He took his kids to school and acted like nothing happened. When her husband left the house, Nneka began to scold the maid, asking her why she should let the husband come home and she wouldn't bother to call. Nneka asked the maid, "Why didn't you call my phone or send me a text when my husband got back? Are you trying to destroy my home?" The maid said, "No ma, I tried, but your husband warned me sternly not to call you, lest I lose my job." Nneka was scared, as she didn't know how her husband would react to the new developments. 3 minutes later, her husband returned from where he went to drop the kids at school. The first word he said was, "Nneka, where are you coming from?" Nneka stuttered. "I went to my friend's house," she responded. He asked again, "When I called you and asked you where you were yesterday, what did you say?" Nneka said, "I'm sorry, my husband. I can explain." The husband asked again, "Explain to me the last time, where you're coming from, and when did you make these friends that had told you that you could stay out of your house without minding what happens to your kids?" Nneka fell on her knees and began to beg her husband. But that was not what he wanted to know. He wanted to know where she went. Angrily, the husband said, "Go back to where you're coming from. When you're ready to be a good wife, let me know." He said, "For months, people have been telling me of how you have been acting and how you have been returning home late, dressing like you are not married. But I told them to stay away from my marriage, and whatever happens in my home does not concern them." She started to beg her husband. She begged him and begged him and begged him, but he didn't want to listen. He pushed her out of the house and told the maid never to let Nneka into this house again, and if she did, she was going to lose her job. Nneka cried and begged the man, but he didn't listen. So Nneka left the house and decided to go to her friend's house with all her luggages. Nneka arrived at Glory's house. Nneka said, "My friend, I have something to tell you. I know it is impromptu, but please listen." She explained everything that happened to her at her home. Glory immediately said, "I am sorry, my friend. I am uncomfortable with this your new development, but I have somewhere I'm going to. I will be out of town for a few weeks, as my trip will be a very long trip, and I can't leave you at home while I travel. But you can ask Janet if you don't mind." Janet might be of help. Nneka was surprised, knowing that her friend Glory had no intentions of traveling to anywhere. Nneka started to call Janet. Janet didn't pick her call. Nneka called and called. Janet didn't pick. When she finally picked, she told Janet that her husband was back from his trip and she could not entertain any friends at the moment, that she had to take care of her home till her husband goes back to work. Confused, Nneka decided to go back to her family house and meet her people in the village. When she arrived the village, she told her parents everything that had happened. Her parents didn't support her. Her mom said to her, "Why would you forget your virtue? Why would you forget the things you had learned before you went to the city? Have you forgotten you're a married woman and you come from a different background as the people you made friends with?" Nneka begged her mom and told her mom to please help her talk to the husband, as she would want to go back to her husband's house. Her father said, "Don't worry, my child. I will try and speak to your husband. But if he says no, it is entirely your fault." Days turned into weeks. Nneka kept crying, asking herself why she allowed unnecessary things ruin her home. One day, her dad told her that he had spoken to her husband and that she could go back home and beg her husband, that this time he would listen. Happy Nneka couldn't wait for her father to conclude whatever she was saying. She hurriedly packed up her things and set off for the big city, as she couldn't wait to meet her husband. Nneka arrived at her home. She knocked on the door and the maid opened the door. The maid was happy to meet her. The maid said, "Welcome, it's been a while." She asked, "Please, where is my husband?" The maid said, "He is up in his room." Nneka hurriedly went to the room to meet him. The first thing she did was to fall on her knees and began to beg him. Her husband told her to get up, that he had forgiven her, and he understood that things like this are bound to happen, especially for someone who just came into the city without directions. That as long as she promised to be a good wife and be a good mother to their kids, that all this will be a thing of the past. Nneka promised her husband that she will be a good wife and she would never repeat the same incident. The husband said he had forgiven her. They both hugged and then they lived happily ever after. That is the end of today's story. Please tell us what you learned from today's story. Thank you.